So the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to do a quick inclusion activity to get to know each other. So on your table, you'll see the random roll of toilet paper that you probably thought was really odd to have on a table. What you're going to do is each of you is just going to take some toilet paper, however much you might need, and that's it for the first step. So I'm not going to give you anything further. Just if everyone grab a little bit, and then you can come back up here, and I'll tell you what we're going to do with that. Okay. So what you're going to do with that is at your tables, you're just going to take turns sharing. For each square that you have, you're going to share something about yourself with your table mates. So great job. You only have to share one thing. Yay. So take a few minutes to share out one per square.
My name is Alyssa. I teach kindergarten. I started out last year at Wolf Meadow in 4th grade, teaching kindergarten. I played basketball in college, and I have 2 dogs. Favorite season is fall. Did a lot of traveling this summer. And then, do you remember when I started there?
That time. Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry that all happened. It's crazy.
It all worked out.
I felt good. That's why her friends. Okay.
Yeah. She got earned some hand butter.
Wow. That's a big, yeah, she was, okay. Turns out that it's good that you start messing it up. Sometimes they change it.
That's all done right.
Yeah. I thought for sure I was my first grade. Because my mentor
Oh, welcome back. The city?
We were there for a day, but we were up in the Adirondack.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm from upstate, so I'm from the Buffalo, Rochester area. So, but when I tell people that, they're like, oh, the city. No, it's the whole state. Oh, okay. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, we've been going for like a month.
All right, so hopefully you all have had a chance to share. Is there anything that someone would be willing to share that either you learned about someone, so maybe you already knew that person because we're similar levels or from the same school that you didn't know, or something that you had in common with somebody else at your table?
We all taught first grade.
Okay, anything interesting that you learned about anyone else?
They traveled a lot.
I heard that over there. I'm jealous.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is I'm just going to kind of show you this course. This is the course that we're going to use the whole year. If you guys don't already know, which I hope you do, we're going to have 5 face-to-face sessions, so we have 4 more, and 1 online asynchronous session. And so once you click into the course, right now it is public, which you use this link to get here. So you may want to either bookmark this or write that enroll code down, or I can email it to you guys once I switch it over so that everyone knows. But it will look the same. You will click into the math side. The reason the ELA is there is because even though you guys are second-year teachers, so you kind of missed out on that ELA year of support, a lot of you still teach ELA. Hopefully all of you still teach ELA as well. And so we wanted you to have access to those resources, those trainings as well, just in case it was something that you really wanted to work on personally. So it's there. You can get into it. You can see everything that Heidi is doing with all of her beginning first year teachers and use those resources if you want to. So that's kind of why we decided to do it that way and not separate courses. Once you click in, those are all of our face-to-face sessions that we'll have. I did not include a separate button for the online because it's probably going to be a discussion board or something, and I'm probably just going to link it within that last course we do right beforehand. So if you get confused, you forget your day, you forget your location, because our locations do change. We will not always be in facilities, unfortunately. We tried to get the same location for every session, and we could not. But if you click into it, it will show you all of our course outcomes. So really the entire course is all about exploring routines and procedures to help make math workshops successful, thinking about ways that we can provide student-centered instruction, connections between procedural and conceptual understanding and how they help one another and work together, questioning and what kinds of questioning and how are we questioning in order to encourage good mathematical discourse, and then formative assessment and what that means and what types of formative assessment we might see within our math workshop. This is going to be your care number when you register, so you will get care credit for it. I'm not going to take that out. It will be there. If you forget it, you can jot it down. It is available now, and you have to register. I put the date by October 1st. So on October 1st, that registration option is going to go away. So just make sure you do it before then. And then our course schedule. So here's where you would find all of your dates as well as your locations. So September 20th is next time I will see you. And we are going to be in Echo. So Echo is in, if you have not been there before, is in the main education center, and it's upstairs. And I'll put a sign out. But most of ours, I think, are Echo, and then you'll be in the boardroom for the very, very last one in that center. So I think all of yours, we kept you kind of in this space. So that's kind of how that works. Any questions about navigating it, seeing how to use it, right? I think we're all pretty good at Canvas at this point. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go into the actual class for today. So today specifically is really just a general overview. So it's covering anything generalized from how am I going to transition children to what should be included in my math workshop, what really is math workshop, better understanding critical areas. We use a CPA model, so really talking about that because some of us are more versed in CPA than others. So today I try not to make it too intense of a session and just kind of like overview and get us all back in the swing of things, because I do know that you guys are kind of thinking about 1,000 things at one time right now, and retention levels might be slightly lower than they will be later in the year today. So the first thing we're going to do is just a quick reflection activity. And just kind of taking some time personally to think about your experience with Math Workshop, whether that be back when your student taught, maybe that was last year in your classroom, maybe that was you had an opportunity to observe some other teachers, whatever that is, whatever your experience is, and kind of think about what you think Math Workshop really is. So what is it? What is the purpose of it? And then in the answer garden, if you just click where it says type your answer here, and type in maybe 2 or 3 things that you're thinking, just quick, short, doesn't have to be complete sentences. But just generally, like, what is Math Workshop? Why do we have it? What is the purpose? Okay, so if you have not done an answer garden before, it's very similar to Wordle. So the more the same word comes up or same phrase comes up, the larger it gets. So you can see already the commonalities, right? So we all kind of think about it as interactive, having small groups, engaging the students, again, interactive learning, student-centered instruction, right? So we have a pretty good idea of what it is. So I think the focus really is implementation, right? We know what it is. We know that it includes these small groups, and it needs to be student-centered. It needs to be interactive. But really, what is the entirety of it, right? So it's beyond small groups, and it includes a lot of other pieces of the day. And then the implementation piece. I also noticed critical thinking. Yay for last year's PD sessions that whoever paid attention to. Some of these other ones, foundational skills, explicit instruction, right? So we have a good understanding. We're going to take all of this. If you noticed, it really does match all of our sessions a little bit. So student-centered instruction, that's one of the sessions. So hopefully a lot of this is going to be covered within the sessions that we have planned out for the year. The sessions are also malleable. So I feel like I want this to benefit you, and I don't want you guys to have to come and sit here for an entire day and feel like you walked away without benefits. So they are not completely planned out yet. And along the course, I'm going to have you guys give me some feedback. And if we need to change one and focus on something different, or if this particular group feels like this is one I don't need, I do want you guys to feel like this is helpful to you. So it is malleable. I'm willing to, whatever it is that you all decide you want to focus on, we can do that. So just know that also, even though the titles are in there. It's a Google picture and I can change it. Okay? All right. So the next piece before we really get started is just kind of a self-evaluation. No one's going to know which star is yours. When you click on this image, it's going to open a Google drawing. And I just kind of want you to think about where you are on the continuum. It does not matter where you are. You're going to drag the, what did I say, pink? No, blue. So you're going to drag one of the blue stars wherever you are along the continuum. The caveat with this is when you need to go back to Canvas, you're going to have to click the back button because getting it to open in a new window was really difficult in HTML code for some reason this time. So once you drag your blue star, if you just click the back button, but I will not know which star is yours. You just grab a blue one and kind of place it where you think. We're going to revisit this at the end of the session and then again at the end of the course. Okay, so if you take a look at where we all put our stars, we're all kind of in around the same place. So that's kind of good because hopefully that will help to have some open conversations where none of us feel a little uncomfortable and those kinds of things. So we're all kind of around here. Hopefully by the end of the course and the end of this session, we can begin to move a little bit further along the continuum and feel a little bit more confident in understanding all of those things. So the next thing is just taking a look at the picture. Okay, so we're going to do a turn and talk with a table mate. You can join on a table, or there is someone who might, there's another teacher who can, either way is fine with me. Okay. And I want you to just kind of think about that picture. How many times you've driven on a road perhaps like that or a highway like that, right? We all have, probably, maybe even to get here today. And think about how it is that you came to be able to do that. So when you weren't always able to just get in a car and drive down the highway. So how did you become able to do that, right? And so I just kind of want you to talk about the process. What was the process for you as an individual to learn how to get up in the morning, get in your car, and drive down 85 if you needed to? Does that make sense? Okay. So just quick with an elbow partner, you can kind of talk about that process and what that was like. So what are some of the things that your table discussed? How did you become able to do something like that?
Practice and confidence.
Okay.
We said, like, the routine of it, like doing it more than once and having some experience to show you how to do it.
Like driver's ed classes that we all had to take.
Good. I also heard you say what kind of highways, right? So like starting maybe in Concord and then driving on like 85 and then the miserable 77.
Yes.
And I said, Atlanta would be like the last one I would do. I hate going to Atlanta. It's like 9 lanes wide if you've ever done it. It's terrible. So you also already made the connection, right? So there's a clear connection between something like that. It's the same thing as how we can think about math workshop, right? So there's all these pieces, and I'm glad you said driver's ed because that's actually the analogy I was going to use. So when we are learning to drive, right, and we all have to know that, and it's something that we need to be able to do, and at this point in life, you really can't function without being able to drive. You can't go anywhere, you can't have a job. So math is similar, right? Everyone needs math, whether we think we do or not. And in order to be successful, we have to have that. But how do we master it? And it's really not any different than when we learned how to drive a car. So you could take your driver's ed course, right? That's kind of like the mini lesson. We generate some ideas. We have some people kind of telling us some stuff. We're not really experiencing it. We're just kind of taking in some information, demonstrating maybe, that kind of thing. But then we move into the driving test, right? So we've taken the coursework. We've been given information, and now we're going to take a driving test. And the driving test is kind of like those guided groups. So someone is with you. They're helping you. They're giving some immediate feedback. They're giving you some constructive points to then learn and grow from as you do that. No, don't back up that way. Oh my gosh, you're really bad at parallel parking. Let's try that again, right? And then once you do that, you're able to get your permit. Kind of go out on your own, independent practice, right? I'm going to go out and I'm going to learn from some other people. I'm going to make some of my own mistakes. I'm going to repetitive practice. I'm going to do it over and over. I'm going to keep doing it until it becomes a routine so that eventually I have mastery and I get my license. So math is similar, right? We go through those same kind of steps, and that was really the point I wanted us to get into, is that all of those pieces are really important and they all serve a certain purpose and they all kind of build on one another. So the first thing we're going to do, really diving into math, is looking at the critical areas. So obviously we are K2. What you guys are going to do is you're going to click into the K2 tab. And these are the critical areas of math according to North Carolina Department of Public Instruction for kindergarten, first, and second grade. And so what I want you to do is just kind of take a look over those critical areas and think about what you notice across the board, across grade levels. Are there any commonalities? Is there anything that might be surprising or you weren't aware of? Because we haven't done, in many cases, a lot of work in specifically looking at this. And so documents that exist in this kind of have gone by the wayside, right? We're trying to learn new standards, and we're trying to do all these other things. But in order to do that, we really have to understand what are the critical areas that we really need students to understand, these foundational skills that are going to support them as they move to second and third and fourth and fifth, right, and all of those grade levels, because we are part of that graduation rate. We are a big part, in my opinion, of the graduation rate, right? All the foundational things that you all are doing in this room are what sets a student up for success in third, fourth, and fifth grade, and then on to secondary. So take a moment, glance over those. You can talk to some table mates if you'd like to. If you just want to think internally about it, I'm going to give you just a few minutes to read over them, look for any commonalities, surprises, anything you notice. Okay. Is there anything in there that stood out to anyone as you looked at those critical areas? Okay, right. So they're helping, they're building on one another. Anything else? So I think it is important also to note that in first grade, you see the same word repetitively, right? What do you see repetitively? Developing, right? So you have to remember, we're developing these concepts, right? So this is not something that they're going to be done with at the end of this year. We're developing them because if you notice in second grade, we're extending and building. I still don't see anything that says mastering, right? Because we're not. So we're developing those things. We are extending and building on concepts. In kindergarten, we're really working on representing what that is so that I can have the ability to further develop and extend. So what we're going to do next is we're going to do an activity with your grade levels. One of you is intermixed, that's okay. You can choose whichever. I'm going to give you the unpacking documents. You can use them, you cannot, right? That's up to you. These are the updated unpacking documents for the new standards. And on the front of your table is a piece of chart paper. And what you're going to be doing is creating an infographic that would share this information with someone who is not familiar with this grade level, someone who's new to the grade level, a brand new teacher, someone maybe outside of education completely that may be a parent, and understanding what is it that my child needs to focus on at these grade levels. And so when you're doing that, you want to make sure you include an explanation of the key points of those critical areas, an example of some higher level questions. So thinking about all that work we did last year with Bloom's taxonomy and Webb's depth of knowledge, and what are some of those higher level questions? Maybe some misconceptions. So I know that when I teach my students, they have this misconception, and I know I have to fight it, and I experienced that last year, and so how am I going to be proactive about it? As well as some different representations. So create a problem, and then create a couple different representations. Does that make sense? So you're going to be just generally looking at, okay, these are the critical areas, and this is the stuff within my infographic. For your question, you can choose just one of those critical areas to develop the question. You don't need to include all of them. Does that make sense? So key points about all of them, and then kind of looking at those things, creating that infographic to help someone better understand it in a simple way. Think about it like a poster that's hanging up real quick. I don't know I'm new to first grade. I'm going to look at this poster, and I have a better understanding. Okay? I'm going to come around and give you the unpacking documents. You have some markers in your bins and the chart paper on the front of your table. I'm going to give you a bit of time on this. It's going to be sort of a competition, just a heads up. So take your time, do some good stuff. I'm going to save them, take some pictures of them. I'm going to come around also and take pictures of you guys now. Like I said, I was going to earlier as you're working, so just ignore that. Okay. So, thought I heard the thingy turn. So what we're going to do next is, if you look in the buckets at your table, you have dot stickers. What you need one dot sticker each. That's it. Doesn't matter what color. None of that matters. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a moment, and I just want you guys to walk around and check out the other posters. So there's one here, 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 and then this one. And I want you to think about if you were explaining the critical areas of your grade level to someone else visually, right? Which one of these do you think does a really great job? They all do a great job, but, competition's healthy also. And so you cannot vote for your own even though some of you probably want to. And you're going to pick one that you think does a really great job of working through that explanation of the critical areas for someone who is less familiar with it, and just put your dot sticker somewhere along the bottom, the side, somewhere on that poster. Is anyone opposed to having stickers put on their poster? Like, I know they're really pretty. Does anyone want a picture before? Okay. So just put your dot on whichever poster you think did a really great job of explaining it and really kind of helps someone to understand those critical areas, and then you can come back to your seat.
It's okay.
Okay. Oh, yay. All right, my table here. Here is your prize for the competition. Yay. But so they all are great. I'm going to leave these up. I think it is important for you to know outside of your grade level as well as within your grade level. So I'm not going to take these down. If anyone wants to snap pictures of them, go back and think about it. I will leave them there for you to be able to do that. But hopefully you kind of took some time to really think through what these areas look like. And I heard some great conversations. I know this table had some good conversations sharing some strategies that some of the people at the table were less familiar with or hadn't used in their classroom. Hopefully everyone kind of had an opportunity to do that, because I think most of our tables are all from different places, even if you probably have seen one another. Okay, so I'm going to go back into the course. The next thing we're going to talk about is the CPA model, so concrete, pictorial, abstract. And the reason we use this is thinking about connecting to reading. So I will do a lot of work, hopefully, over this course of connecting how math looks and the concepts that we talk about in math and how we approach math workshop to our knowledge of literacy, because they really don't need to look that different. And so when we think about students learning to read, they start with picture books, right? We don't give them words first. We give them picture books, and there aren't any words, but they're still able to tell that story, right? They're still able to understand what's happening in a book if I take the words out of those through those visual representations. And so manipulatives act in that same manner for students. So they need to understand the concept before they can really understand that abstract thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this. If you click on that link, it's going to take you to just kind of a general overview of the CPA math instructional approach. So it just takes you to a quick PDF that kind of goes over the stages. I'm going to give you just a minute to glance over those and just look at what maybe you already did know or what maybe you weren't aware of, because this is part of our Common Instructional Framework as well in Cabarrus County. So just take a moment, scroll through, kind of look at those 3 phases and some of the notes. It's really short and quick, and I'll just give you a little bit of time for that. Okay. Is there anything that maybe you didn't know, or anything that stuck out about CPA, or maybe you were familiar with it and this is a quick refresher? Is there anything anyone could share out about that? How many of you kind of already have knowledge of or experience with this, or even knew that this was part of the Common Instructional Framework? Yay. Okay, so the reason we use the CPA approach is because if you look at the screen and I asked you, okay, out of those 4 things, which of those are letters and which are numbers? Can you tell me? No, right? So this is Hindi. These are Hindi numbers and letters. And it's the same thing with our students. So if I show them the symbol 5, it doesn't look very different than letters in the beginning, right? It's got some curved lines, some straight lines, I don't know. So I have to build their understanding of what that is before they know that a 5 is a 5 and not a B, right? If I ask a student which is larger, 3 5/10 or 1 389 thousandths, well, a large percentage is going to say 1 389 thousandths because there's more digits. It's a longer number. So it's the same thing. If I ask most students 3rd through 5th grade which is larger, an 8th or a 4th, they're going to tell me an 8th because the 8 is bigger. And so we really need to spend some time living in the CPA approach so that we really can build that conceptual understanding and make sure that they have a grasp on that before we try and throw them into this abstract world of all these lines and curves and straight lines and things that don't really make sense or don't have a meaning for them. So we are going to create a foldable because we're elementary people, that's what we do. On your table, you have some plain white paper. We're going to take it and we're going to make this, okay? So if you fold your paper, there's scissors also. So if you fold your paper not quite in half so you can have something that goes over, you're going to cut the 3 flaps and just write concrete, pictorial, abstract. On the outside, or inside, I guess, flap, we're just writing down kind of what was in that graphic so that this is maybe a tangible physical phase, the doing one. This is the seeing, and this is the abstract. So you're just going to write concrete, pictorial, abstract, and then a really quick brief of each one of those. It doesn't have to look exactly like mine, but just because we know we learn better and retain better by doing. Okay, so what we're going to do next is we're going to take a moment to really look at how this applies to your particular grade level. You all know, or hopefully you know, that we have some new math standards that the state rolled out. If you have not looked at them yet, you will be doing so soon at your school level. But I think that many people are pretty happy with the changes that were made in the standards. There was a little bit less change at the K2 level, but I think that it really helps to support kind of all the things that we've been doing in Cabarrus County anyway. And so we're going to take a minute. We're going to take a look at some standards. So I put them around the room. I'll let you know where your grade level is. But when you're looking at those, I want you to be thinking about, as you read the standard, what you notice about it just in general. So what do you notice about that standard that is on that chart paper? I also want you to think about how does that standard perhaps better support the CPA model, or maybe not better, but just how does it support the CPA model that we include in our common instructional framework, and then how will that impact our teaching and our planning purposes. So what do you notice? How does it support CPA, and how does it impact our practices? Okay. I want you to just kind of have a conversation as a grade level about that, because we're going to do a sharing piece in just a moment. So I want you to be thinking as you're talking about those things, something that you might be able to share out. Okay. I also need you, if you do not mind, for this activity to bring in your bucket, there's a half sheet of white paper and something to write with to your paper. This will be where my second grade comes. This one is kindergarten, and that one right there is first grade. So if you could bring the half sheet of white paper and a pen, and then just kind of talk about as you arrive there. What do you notice about the standard? How does it support CPA? And how does it impact our instruction and planning? Okay, I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to do that. If you will finish up that thought. All right, so what we're going to do next is, based on the conversations that you all had, you're going to take your paper. I'm sorry it's a little awkward that you're going to write and stand, but the next activity is going to be right back at the chart paper, so I didn't think it was, if you want to come sit down, you can. But you're going to just jot down something that you noticed, something that you discussed, something that stood out to you, something that you found interesting. It kind of is up to you, but just a thought that you want to share based on the conversation you had around that standard and all of the things that you discussed. You're going to jot it down. After you jot it down, we are all going to crinkle up our papers, and we are going to have a snowball fight. So we're going to toss them around the room, and you're going to pick up a new paper. Okay, so you're going to jot yours down. I'm going to give you a couple seconds. Once I know everyone is crinkled, we're going to throw them at the same time. So once you have it crinkled, if your eyes back up here, that'd be great.
Do we write down like which standard it was?
Nope, you don't have to include your grade level or your standard, just kind of a thought from the conversation. Good question. So the great part about this strategy, while we wait for just a few more minutes, is this is something you can do in your classroom that gives everyone a voice. No name is on any paper, so no one knows what anyone wrote. So there's kind of that the freedom to share without the nervousness of I said something that someone thought was silly or whatever that is. So it's a good strategy in that way. And students who are not so great at speaking or who do not like speaking are still sharing ideas and communicating in a way that is kind of leverageable for everyone. At a younger grade, it could even be that you're drawing a picture about something, you're drawing your understanding of it at a kindergarten level, something that represents it, and tossing it. So all the strategies that I use in here, I hope will be at least one or two of value that you can take back to the classroom. So that's kind of one of the reasons we're doing this one. So what we're going to do next is you're just kind of going to glance around, toss your papers like a snowball, and find a new one. As you open the new one, if you could just kind of read over it, and what I would like is for a couple people to share out. If you picked up one that you thought was really interesting, something that was similar to what you wrote down, something that you think is of value to sharing, maybe change your opinion was the same as what you said, even though it perhaps was a different grade level. And so in sharing that out, it also makes it a safe place for students to share out, because I'm not sharing my idea. So it's okay for me to share it, because we don't know whose idea it is. So it kind of makes it a more comfortable way of getting everyone to communicate and share. So is there anything that someone can share that you picked up on the paper that you thought, wow, this is really interesting or similar to something I said?
This one says using fingers, acting it out, objects are all great ways to represent in a concrete way. It's kind of what we were thinking too, that like you were relating this to the CPA model.
Good. Anyone else have anything interesting you picked up?
This one says the standard got rid of some of the fluff against the basic points. Also moved through the CPA approach from concrete to models and drawings to explain reasoning. Because some of the standards are super long and you're like, I'm lost, I don't understand, and now it's like to the point, bullet point, bullet point.
Good. Anything else? No, that's okay. So those are all true. So hopefully when you look at the new standards, if you have not had an opportunity yet, it did take out some of that fluff, right? And it also took out a lot of educational jargon, so that one, teachers who had not taught for as long could get it, right? But even, I use this example all the time. There was a 4th grade standard that was like, A over B equals whatever. And teaching for 10 years, and I switched grade levels and got to it, and I thought, I have no idea what the standard means at all. And so it also did that in a way to help parents. So if I'm sitting down with a parent, I'm trying to talk to a parent and explain it, I'm taking out the educational jargon, all the fluff, and it really is, this is what it is. It also took out a lot of examples, because the examples seemed to be limiting. So there were some times where it felt like, well, this is the one way I have to teach it, or the one thing I have to teach, instead of that really being one example. So it kind of took a lot of that stuff out too. You'll also notice that across grade levels, they all kind of have, I noticed at every grade level almost, you said, oh, it even uses that word concrete or the word models. And so they've rewritten those in a way that really supports what we already had believed and been practicing in our county. So I think it's going to be a really good alignment. The reason you're still standing is because what you're going to do now is at your chart papers, you can come grab some markers. I want you to create, based on that standard, what would that look like in a classroom at the concrete phase? And then as you move them into the pictorial phase, and as they finally go into the abstract phase. I also want you to think about the modeling. So from modeling to algorithms, that chart in there is a really key resource, because we often think that we have to have students in that abstract phase mastered and done, and that is not true. So actually proficiency with an algorithm, no matter what the operation is not expected till 4th grade. So 4th grade is when they are expected to use a standard algorithm to do addition and subtraction of whole numbers. So that's, I think, a little different too, because I think we often felt like, well, they have to be able to do this abstract thing, and they have to have mastered an algorithm and all those things, and that's not the case. So in K1 and 2, it's really about just building understanding and modeling the whole time. And so there you are going to have students who get there, right? They're going to be able to use the algorithm. They're going to be able to live in that abstract phase, but that's not the expectation. And so the expectation is I can solve it by modeling. I may not have mastered that standard algorithm by the end of the year, and that's okay. I don't expect them to. So just take some markers, some time, think about, okay, if I'm teaching this, because you will be, right? You're at your grade level, you will be teaching this standard. When I teach this, well, how am I going to move students between these phases or through these phases of the CPA model? Because I really also want you to leave today with something that you can implement, something that you can take back and think about and remember and do. Yeah?
So I do have a question regarding report cards. So if a student can't consistently recognize the equations of addition and subtraction, can you still give them a 3 if they can represent 3?
So I think that depends on, and we can maybe look at that if I found on my computer, which I think I do. I think that depends on what specifically is outlined in the standard and what the expectation of that standard is. So if a standard does not say using a standard algorithm, Yes, right? Because that's not the expectation. So most of our standards do not have that at K2 level, even if they used to, because that is not the expectation. So yes, but I would say, without me just blanket statement, yes, I would take a look.
One, if solving addition, subtraction, operations fluently or something, that's like the
Yeah, so,
category.
yeah,
Does it have to
so,
be like a 2 if they put it consistently?
well,
together?
you can do that fluently without the algorithm. So fluency, we're going to talk about that in some other sessions. Fluency has become a word that we have adapted to have a different meaning. And so fluency and automaticity are not the same thing, right? And so I can be fluent in solving something without having the algorithm mastered. So fluency is really about being flexible in my strategies and knowing which strategies are best suited for it to be able to solve it. And not so much, I know that we often think of fluency as like 3 times 4 is 12, 5 times 4 is 20, but that's different. So that's not really fluency, even though we've kind of adapted that definition of it. So I think, yes, they could have a 3 because they can be fluent as long as they have a strategy that allows them to solve and be flexible in it. Okay, good question. Anything else? Okay, so you can grab some markers, think about that standard. How's that going to look in your classroom based on what you know about your students and your teaching experience from last year and knowledge of the CPA model? Okay, so hopefully you had some time to have some good discussion on what that might look like, how you might do that in your classroom. The other piece that I want to make sure I mention before I move on from CPA is that a lot of times these stages overlap. So in order to get a student to move from concrete to pictorial, I have to do them simultaneously. So I'm going to work in concrete until I feel like that student looks like they really can come up, they can do it, they don't really need support, they can pull out the manipulatives, they know which ones to use. And then as they're doing that, they're looking at it while they're drawing the picture, and then eventually I can move away from the manipulatives just to the picture. So a lot of times this is going to be overlapping as you move between phases. So it's not so much this one then the other. So we've done a lot of work on some overviews, some looking at standards, what are the critical areas, but really one piece that I think is really important, and I assume probably you all experienced, I remember I did, every year, not just my first year, is figuring out that structure and organization that's going to be effective. And so I think that I dealt with that every year because every year I have a new group of kids. And so what worked the year before no longer worked. And that's really one of the most, I think, challenging parts about implementing Math Workshop is figuring out how do I introduce it? How do I have a structure that supports it? How do I make sure my students know how to transition between activities? Right, that one. How do I make sure they know the expectations? And so all of the logistical stuff. So we can spend a lot of time looking at standards and planning and all of those things. But if you don't have the right logistical setup, it's not going to matter because it's not going to work efficiently. And so I wanted to take some time today to make sure we looked at that a little bit too. And you can kind of think about your experiences last year. I'm sure that you've already reflected on that and thought of some ways that you might change, some other things you might implement or adapt how you did things. How are students going to know what group they're in? How do they know if their group changes, right? Because our group should be very fluid. It shouldn't be that I'm in this group with the same people for 6 weeks just because it's an arbitrary 6 weeks, right? As I see the need, I change the students in the groups. And so how do we make sure our students know that? So what we're going to do is I'm just going to give you some opportunity and some time to kind of work at your own pace on the things that interest you, because I think that's important. There are a couple things I want to point out before we do that. So this is just kind of some things you might need to consider. How many groups am I going to see a day, right? Am I going to see 3? Am I going to see 4? Am I only going to see 1? How's that going to look? What day? Is this a day I have a shorter math block because I have a longer planning period? All of those kinds of things. What does the daily schedule actually look like? And in order to explore some of that stuff, I've created a Thing Link. If you have not used a Thing Link before, all you do is hover. When you hover, a bunch of dots come up. These dots in this particular Thing Link are all just pictures with a little caption beneath it of things to think about. You can also create Thing Links that embed videos, articles, all those things. Thing Link is a great resource if you want your children to be exploring something, but you want to do it in a very controlled manner. So I want them to all be looking at this particular content area. Maybe even though this is math, right? But maybe I'm teaching a social studies lesson and I want them to see some stuff. I'm not going to just put them on a website. I'm going to embed it in a thing link and have it controlled. The other pieces that I want you to take some time to look at are there are some possible planning documents. So some templates for how would I think through my small group plans, as well as I've linked this. If you go to page 8, student grouping options is a new part of our Common Instructional Framework that we just revised this summer. And so we put in some ideas to just kind of help you think about what could the groupings look like and how could I adjust that. The other piece in here, okay, so if you go to page 8, I don't know if these pages, you know how sometimes they don't actually align? We'll see. Yeah. Okay, so it's going to give you some options of thinking about, do I want 3 groups? Do I want 2 groups? How many times do I want to meet with the group? So think about that as you go through this. And then the final piece is taking a look at Week of Inspirational Math. And so if you click on this image, it's going to take you to a short PowerPoint that kind of talks about Week of Inspirational Math. That resource is linked in every single grade level's first unit. Because it's really great on building that positive classroom climate and building a mathematical community. And so I'm going to give you guys a bit of time here because I really want you to take some time and think about it. You guys are planning your rooms right now. You're already thinking about how you're going to structure and organize. It would be great to talk amongst each other or even across grade levels, so thinking about that and getting some ideas. Maybe something didn't work so great for you last year and you need some other options. Maybe something worked awesome and you really want to tell other people. So I'm going to give you about 20 minutes. We're going to come back together about 10:25 to kind of go through that thing link, these planning documents, and then taking a glance at the Week of Instructional Math. As you do that, however, there's an AHA's confirmations and questions sheet on your table. And I want you to use that to jot some stuff down because we're going to do an activity with that sheet. So AHA, right? Like, oh, I didn't know that, or that's really interesting. Confirmation, I already knew that and I'm feeling real good about it. And then anything that maybe is a question you still have that did not get answered. If you don't, it's this one. Sorry. So can I borrow it? Mm-hmm. It looks like this. So this is just kind of to help you record some of your thoughts and ideas as you work through those. Okay? So we will take until about 10:25 to just kind of look through all that and have some good conversations. All right. So hopefully you have had enough opportunity to get some thoughts down and look at these resources. What we're going to do next is use a protocol just called Mingle. You can do this in your classroom also. And so we are going to, in a moment, stand up and push our chairs in, because you know this space is kind of small. We're just going to walk around. You're going to find somebody to talk to that is not at your table, so somebody different. And you're just going to share one of the things that you recorded in the AHA column. Or if you don't have something recorded, just something that you looked at and you were like, oh, for about 30 seconds. And then once it lulls and you guys are done and you can kind of, everything comes back down, we are going to move again, find a new partner, share the confirmation, and then do a third one to share some lingering questions. So you're only discussing one column in each of those movements. Does that make sense? Okay. So you can go ahead and hop up, find somebody that is not at your table, and discuss the AHA. When you're done discussing, if you just want to glance back up here so I know we're ready to move on. What you're next? Go ahead, find somebody different. You're going to discuss that second column, things that were confirmed as you look through those resources. So you mingle, mingle, mingle. Find somebody else. We'll do the same way. Okay, so we are going to do this one more time. Find one more partner and talk about any questions you maybe had. See if they had the same questions. Maybe they have an answer to it or something that they can share with you that will help clarify that question you may have had. Okay? You can make your way back to your spot. As we do that, I want to, before I move on, give anyone that has any lingering questions, any burning questions, anything that you really just feel like I really want to ask and I didn't get an answer. I just want you to have an opportunity. We'll have opportunity for questions at the end as well. But is there anything before we continue that at this point you just really need an answer to? And it is okay if the answer is yes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, so we talked about transitioning between the groups and how she made it like a competition between her and kids to, which group can transition the fastest. But in case that doesn't work with my friends, does anybody else have any suggestions for transitioning quickly and effectively? So between the rotations.
I haven't done it, but I've seen this cool thing with the doorbell. You get like a doorbell in your classroom and you carry the like actual thing on your neck, and so it's like a loud chime, and just like without words, like that chime.
I use that and I have them put their hands on their head as soon as they hear that, and then I say, okay, it's time to get to the next station.
Yeah. I do hands on top, everybody stop. And then I say dominoes point to the iPad, iPads point to the puzzle.
Yeah.
And then they're pointing where they're going. And you'll have like one or two that just are lost. But and then it just go. It works.
I found this PowerPoint. I don't know. I can send it to you if you want it. I don't know where I found it. One of my team members found it, but it changes automatically after, like, these are my reading stations, so it changes automatically after 15 minutes, and then it goes to this time up cleaner, and this is 1 minute, and they can see the timer going down, and they have to be in their new station by the time it hits it's like done, and then it switches to the next one. And it does it automatically, like, I don't have to get up and touch anything, because I pull my guided reading groups, like, based on ability from so, like, they might come out of their phonics station or whatever. So if I'm not done yet and I'm still working, like, I taught my kids at my table, like, you don't worry about what's going on over there. You stay with me. I don't have to get up and switch anything. My kids know, like, when that goes off and the timer comes up, they get up, they move. If they're not there by the time that it goes down because they're playing around or whatever, that's clip down. Like, just setting those expectations from the beginning. But I made this for reading and for math, and it was super, super, super helpful because I didn't have to do anything.
And part of that, too, is great that relating that whole math and literacy side. So that is one of the ways that you can do your math groups as well, right? So I don't have this rotation. They're doing their stuff. I'm pulling from multiple places because I'm pulling based on my data and student needs, and that might mean that they're in different places. So that's something you can consider, too. Like you said, I made this for math also because they look really similar. Realistically, literacy workshop looks very similar to math workshop. Was someone else going to say something?
I was going to say, I got the Echo Dot in my room this year, and they care about Alexa a lot more than they care about me. So when Alexa tells them it's time to move around, they move around.
Something I did, which I was having a really hard time with transition, it was like towards Easter, and I got jelly beans, and I called them thinking beans. And my kids are only motivated by candy. Last year, that's all I cared about. So I would pick like one person in each group who was ready, and I would give them a thinking bean or whatever. Whoever the first one was, and then if they already got a thinking bean, they could receive another one, or I would try to look for somebody else in the next station, which they all were really like motivated about.
Good. That actually is a good segue into what we're doing next. So what we're going to do next is an activity called List Group Label. It can be kind of adapted and adjusted per grade levels. Think about how it looks at different grade levels if you're going to implement it in the classroom, and they won't be able to do it exactly probably the way we're doing it, especially with K2, but there are ways to implement that. And this is also included if you're not aware. In the Teacher Resource Canvas course, there's a PD tab, and one of the PD sessions is called PDQ, and it's just all 30-minute or less, really quick, like what strategy can I use and how can it be implemented K2, 3, 5 across contents, and so this is one in there that you could get some ideas as well. Most of these are actually in there. And so what you're going to do is individually, without talking to your table mates for the first part, you're going to take some sticky notes. I came around and gave more because I realized I only put one in each bucket, and that would be difficult to do individually. And you are just going to think about what things, like transitions, do I need to consider when I'm planning how I'm going to implement Math Workshop, when I'm planning what that's going to look like in my classroom. And you're just going to write one thing per sticky note. So transitions might be one of the things on one of the sticky notes. I have to think about how I'm going to do that. So based on all of the stuff that we've done this morning, the resources that you looked at, and what you know in your own experience, one idea per sticky note, what am I going to consider while I'm planning this out? And what am I going to consider when I'm implementing my Math Workshop? What you're going to do with those sticky notes is, as a table, you might want to create a little bit of space. You are going to talk to one another, share out your sticky notes, but you are going to have to group them. The number of groups is dependent on what you determine, but however you group them needs to have a label. So all of these fit under this umbrella, so I'm going to put them all here, and this is the label that my group determined fits these sticky notes. It does not matter as long as you have at least 2 categories. That's fine, you can have just one. But whatever conversation arises with, okay, these all are around this particular title, that's what you're going to do. So at your tables, you're going to create that label and put those sticky notes under those. Does that make sense? Okay, it looks like most of us have had an opportunity to create those groups. And so what you're going to do is in the Padlet, you are going to enter just your categories, so that overarching category. So all you need to do if you have not used Padlet before is click on the plus sign, and it will let you type. And you're just going to type those overarching categories that you had, however many that was.
Does everybody do it or one person?
One person in your group is fine. Good question. As you begin looking at what other people are putting in, what we're going to be doing is looking as a group at commonalities and identifying potentially the top 4 that continue to come up. So like I noticed engagement was in a couple of them. So thinking about the top maybe 3 or 4 categories that you noticed that kind of were commonalities among the tables. So you can begin to kind of think about that as well, and I'm going to do the same thing while we type those in. So what are some ones that you think kind of come up more than once or more often that you think might be a commonality among the entire room? Or maybe some of these that we can lump together and they seem like a category. So maybe that's not the concept, but a couple of those go into the concept.
So engagement, engaging the students.
Okay, so engagement. Time and transitions, yep.
Student grouping.
Okay.
Strategy.
All right.
Student grouping.
It could, right? So that could. All right. So this is what we're going to do next. At your tables, you are going to separate out 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, depending on where you are. You guys can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And all of the people that determine to be ones, or however you want to split that up, are going to come up here, and I want you to work on, what was that first category? Remind me. Sure. Engagement. I can't remember what we said first. I just remember some of them. So just title this engagement. What we're going to be doing is we're just going to be sharing out and brainstorming some of those discussions you already had. So mostly what we're doing is making key points so that at the end of today we can take some pictures. Like I know you talked about that one person that had really helped you and you used a lot of those resources. That would be a great thing to put on one of these. So then I can take a snapshot of it, and when I go back to my classroom, I can remember some of the conversations that we had that help us with this. So we can do student engagement over here. I know we talked about transitions already once, but that came up again. So transitions would be here to be able to share a couple more ideas. Student grouping can be over here. And then this one, does anyone remember? Time and management kind of techniques, okay? So does that all make sense? And if you forgot what I said, I will come and try and remember at your group. But hopefully you did. It does not matter to me how you split, but I just kind of want the tables to split up because we've been kind of talking to the same people at the same grade level, and it'd be great to hear some of those resources from other grade levels or other people. All that makes sense. I'm going to give you guys about 5 or 10 minutes. I don't think it'll take that long. It's really just what are some key points, key ideas, key resources that I've discussed or I've experienced so that I can recall and take them back to my classroom. Okay, so we have spent a lot of time having these great discussions, sharing some good ideas. I'm going to leave all of these up when you guys go to lunch. I'm going to try and make them look slightly more organized. So I'll put all the CPAs in order, K1, 2 together and all those things. But we spent a lot of time doing that, and now I want to take some time and think about what successful implementation looks like. And so we're going to do a video activity, a video analysis. In your buckets, you have a sheet, or on your table, you have a sheet that is an AEIOU sheet. This is a spotlight on strategies protocol. And so Discovery Education, though we do not use it in the same way we used to, has a lot of spotlight on strategies that are really great for the classroom. They also break them down into what is it that I'm really trying to get from the strategy, and here's one that will give you that information. So on your sheet, it explains what each of those are. So as you're watching the video that you choose or are assigned, the A is going to be to write down some adjectives you notice. E is some emotions that it makes you feel. I'm looking at yours, just so you know. The I is something that you found interesting within that video. O is something that just made you like, oh, that's cool, or I didn't notice that, or oh, that's great, that confirms what I was thinking. And then that U is kind of that question, like, oh, I saw this, but I have some questions about it. So as you're looking at the videos, I also want you to think about the fact that there might be something you see that you don't think was great, that maybe that person or that teacher could have used some more support in. So it's not necessarily that this is exactly what it needs to look like. It's you thinking about, is it what it needs to look like? And what did I notice in it that was great? And what did I notice that maybe I want to explore more because I want to make sure that maybe that doesn't happen in my room, perhaps. So I'm going to give you guys, I think I put in here about 10 or 15 minutes. None of the videos are lengthy, I promise. The longest one is a 10-minute video, but it is worth it. The rest of them are pretty short. So at your tables, you can kind of decide how you want that to look. Initially, I was going to have us count off. Our group size got a bit smaller, and so to adjust for that, you can, if it were me, I would probably have each person do a different video just so I can get some different insight. And then if I finish up early, look at some that I have of interest. So maybe your tables kind of decide, I'm going to do the first one, I'll do the second one. And then if I'm watching the second one and I get done early, but I'm really interested in number talk specifically and I didn't get to see that video, then I'm going to go ahead and watch the number talks in addition to whatever video I had. But we are going to share out, so it would be good for us to kind of watch some different things because you're not going to have time to watch all 6 at this moment, but you could, that way you can at least hear about some of them. Okay? So I'll give us about 10 or 15 minutes to kind of look through those videos, jot some notes down, and be prepared to share something that you noticed. What we're going to do next is at your tables, I just kind of want you to have a table talk and share out some of the things you noticed, some of the questions you had, some of the things that might have been interesting about your video. And then we're going to come back together and I'm going to let you know the last kind of thing we're going to do before we wrap up for lunch. Okay, so I know that you may or may not have gotten to go through everything that you saw or wanted to. We can come back to that, though, and we will take some time to be able to wrap up anything that you feel like maybe was a loose end. Is there anything that anyone wanted to share that you really felt strong about? Is there a question that maybe you didn't get answered that you still are wondering about that prior to moving on we want to wrap that part up? Okay, so I saw some really good questions as I was walking around the room. Like, I know you did the number talks video. I'm sorry to call you out. And her question was, are all the students really? How did you word it?
Are all students really following along while the other students are explaining?
Right. So, I might have interpreted that differently. So you can come back for that. But initially, when I walked by and I saw that, I thought I interpret it as in, are they really understanding, like following in terms of understanding and not engagement? So I'm not sure which way you meant. In terms of understanding, I think that no, not necessarily, right? So when you're doing number talks or any kind of mental math or any of those kinds of routines, your students are all over the place, right, academically. So it is not necessarily that they are following along in terms of their understanding and they understand what another student is saying. The value in a number talk and mental math is for them to see those other strategies and then they build their understanding off from hearing the other ideas they wouldn't have thought of. So they're not necessarily always following along in terms of their understanding, but that's how we're building that. So I thought that was a really great question. Now in terms of engagement, I think that's something that you have to find a way in terms of management techniques and styles to instill that and get it there because that's a whole different situation and different question. So I'm not sure which way you meant, but I thought it was really interesting because they're not always going to understand the strategy that's being said. But the goal is that we're hearing all of these and we're making connections. So, that sounded similar to my strategy, and now I'm going to be able to take it to the next level after I've been exposed to that so many times.
I had a question. I did the stations one about it mentioned briefly like having accountability in the groups. And I wondered how do you build an accountability in in kindergarten, first, second grade?
Mm-hmm.
Like how do you do that? That you know that they're getting something from the group.
Yeah, so that's really funny because on my sheet, so I filled out a sheet for all these, and my sheet says, how do I build accountability? So I have done a lot of work in different circumstances, different places with that, but before I just share information, because I am definitely not the genius of all things, is there anyone here that maybe has experience? How did you build accountability?
We all have Seesaw. Yeah, because that was huge, just the pictures, and then I would have them record, not only did they take a picture, they had to record what they did and why they came up with that, like on the picture. That was really helpful.
Yeah. Or if they were doing something in their journal, I'd make like a goal. So you have like 10 problems to do. The goal is to do like 8 of them.
So I think accountability at a K2 level looks very different than once we move into upper grades and beyond. And so you have to think about, we need accountability, because if we don't have it, how do I know they're doing anything, right? So I can give them all kinds of great tasks and all kinds of great games, and I'm sitting there pulling my small groups, and they look like they're doing great stuff, right? Just like the person who opens the book, and then when you look, it's upside down, because they're not reading, right? And so it's the same thing. So thinking about, that's a huge deal. How do we build accountability? And I think at this level, that really varies, but it's really about having the product, but not for the sake of the product, but it's serving a dual purpose. So, okay, the video, right? So the video, yes, serves the purpose of now you're accountable, but also it's a product. It's allowing them to express themselves, show what they know. It's not always necessarily about the right or wrong answer. It's about building the thinking process. So even if you got the wrong answer, let's look at how we're building you as a mathematical thinker. And so I think at a K2 level, it could be a lot of different things. I know Hallie and I talked about what is journaling like, what could that be like at kindergarten level. At a lower level where we're not able to like write down a written response, it's this lengthy thing, and that's okay. And so I talked to that table a little bit earlier about maybe your journal is just draw a picture that shows what you learned today. Right now, some of your students might draw a unicorn. Okay, well, that tells you some information also because they drew a unicorn. But it's just having them express it, right? So I think accountability doesn't have to be this crazy lengthy, because I think sometimes we also get stuck in building the accountability piece that then we feel overwhelmed because we have to create and prepare and look at and assess and all this stuff, these pieces, when it really doesn't need to be that. It can be as simple as take a picture of what you created during your station, or take a picture of you guys working, or put a video in Seesaw. I know not everyone has Seesaw, or maybe they do. I probably shouldn't have said that. I'm not sure. But there's other options, right? So you can do iMovies. You can do, if you train them, I've even seen kindergartners be able to use the Google, like record themselves or write something in Google and share it with the teacher. So it's about figuring out what's best for you and not making it this extra piece and this extra work, but making it a part of the day. That's just something simple that lets me know they did something, shares a bit of information with me, but is not this overwhelming, I have to prepare this thing. Because it's not always about preparation. It's just about sharing your thinking and making sure I know that you were thinking. I don't know if that helped, though. Okay.
One cool resource I found is this thing called Edpuzzle. And it's for if you want kids to watch a video. So instead of, whenever I teach a lesson with the group, I don't want to show the video every single time and lose that time. You can upload the video to there, and you can insert questions in it, and the video refuses to play until they answer the question. Mm-hmm. And then they can keep on going. And that's really cool. I've been using it for like character trait building this year, and it's like I will see reports that they have finished.
I used to use one, but it wasn't called that. And the one I used is no longer existing. Thanks. I just want to write that down for myself too, because I don't remember the one that I used to use what it was called, and I went on to try and do it because it's the same thing. So you can do it in math, like you said, right? So in math, I can put something up there because we use the Khan Academy and all those things and learn Zillion.
And that's LinkedIn. There's YouTube, there's Khan Academy. I want to say Brain Pop was on there, but I can't remember if it is or not because I know you have to have an account for Brain Pop. But it was really great.
Yeah.
All that up.
And then that automatically lets you pause where you want to, even though you're not the teacher, and builds an accountability.
Also just insert like commentary or your voice in a video that says like, especially for like upper grades and stuff, like in science they use this term in this video, we use this term, so this is what they're talking about, so you can explain that even though you're not
awesome.
Right there.
Cool. That is cool. I'm going to play with that myself as well. Great. Anything else? Questions, takeaways, anything before we continue? Okay. So before we go to lunch, the only thing that I want to do is I want to do a couple names out of here for before lunch, and then we'll finish up the rest. So we'll be back at 1:15. The afternoon is going to look like a planning time. So the afternoon is really going to be collaborating with your grade level. I'm going to give you the units for the first 2 units.